Greetings everyone, this is A Shot of Whiskey. This video is going to be me giving you guys some updates on what's been going on in my personal life, one of which is a somewhat serious family matter situation, and it kind of relates to the MGTOW message. The other story, which I'm going to do that one first, is about the anime convention I just went to and the fan fictions that I submitted. So if you're not interested in that part, I don't blame you. I'll provide a time here for you to look at so you know about where to skip on the timeline just to hear the other story, if you guys want to. So the convention itself was okay. There were some things that didn't go quite according to plan, but whatever. That's kind of the norm for me, unfortunately. So the main fanfic that I worked on, which I've shown pictures of it. I think I still have it somewhere. If so, I'll put it up here. If not, I'll probably find something else. But the main story is from an anime called Wanna Be the Strongest in the World. The basic plot is the main character is a teen pop idol who becomes a pro wrestler. And the series ends with her and her best friend being invited to join the world circuit under the tutelage of the world champ. Quite an honor, really. So that's quite literally where it ends. And I decided to expand upon that. So the story that I wrote takes place 10 years after that ends. So that would be last month when it happened. In fact, I had the main event that finalized the story taking place on day 3 of the convention, just because I thought that would be kind of a fun little thing for the judges to look at and enjoy, especially since I had it take place in Portland, where the convention itself was taking place at. Now, because I didn't want to create a few dozen of my own characters, and because I was under the impression that the judges frowned on the overuse of OCs, I decided to make this into a crossover with 17 other franchises. Among them, and perhaps the most famous of them all, is the Capcom universe. Granted, that's several franchises in one. I don't care. But it includes Street Fighter, the most famous of them all, perhaps, as well as Ace Attorney and Power Stone. I threw in some other fighting games that had nothing to do with Capcom, such as King of Fighters, Rumble Roses, and Dead or Alive. I also threw in some old and new anime, such as Ranma 1/2, Wannabes, and Kaijo. Anyway, the world champion in this series has to retire due to a major injury to her spine. This leads to the creation of a massive tournament to determine a new world champion. Long story short, the main character makes it to the finals, which I already mentioned takes place in Portland during day 3 of the convention, which also was on International Men's Day, November 19th. And as a result, I decided to make that part of the story. Not a huge part, but something that is covered a few times here and there in the story. Now, I'd like to add that along with this long-ass story, I also quickly wrote 2 short stories. One of them is something called a drabble, which for those of you who don't know, that's a story that is exactly 100 words long. This one that I did was a crossover with a character from the previously mentioned Ranma 1/2, somehow making his way to Sesame Street. And if you know anything about the Ranma character Ryoga Hibiki, you'll understand why I say somehow. The other story that I wrote was 10 consecutive haiku, which was done in a way to tell the life story of one of the secondary characters from Demon Slayer. This year's contest, which they kind of vary how they do the awards based mostly off of what they've received from contestants. But they did it this year to where there was 5 grand winners and 10 honorable mentions. The haiku story was one of the 5 grand winners. Yay for me. The drabble was an honorary mention, and I can only assume it's because they thought it was freaking hilarious. Which usually when I write a drabble, I try to have it be as funny as possible. That long-ass novel didn't win shit. Now, when the panel was done and over with, the head judge talked with anyone and everyone who wanted to know why a certain thing didn't win anything. And she told me that the reason why my novel didn't get anything is for one reason. And I kind of agree with her. When you're writing a story, you usually want to keep the same format going. Now, for those of you who are writers, you'll understand what I'm saying. You don't usually want to combine story formats with script formats. I did that quite a bit. Originally, I was only going to do it in cases when a match would be taking place, and I wanted to have a way to have commentary taking place. Because usually when you're watching a pro wrestling match, like Monday Night Raw or some shit like that, you almost never see the commentary team when a match is taking place. Usually the cameras are focused on the matches, and you hear them talking. That's why I wanted to do the script writing. But as time went on, I'm like, you know what? Script writing fits this situation better for me, which I usually hate doing that, but for some reason I decided to go with it. So I'm not going to argue with the reason why I didn't win, because it's a valid point as far as I'm concerned. Either way, it's all done and over with. Good riddance. If I wanted to rewrite it, which I don't, but if I did, that would be what I would change on it based off of how this contest went. Instead, I'm going to focus on my other projects, which includes writing my novel, which I'm still toying with the idea between doing a novel and a comic. I'm experimenting with a comic style a little bit. I haven't done as much as I would like to, but I do plan on doing more experimenting with that, mostly once the holiday season is done and over with. Which brings me to the next story, which hopefully at this point, if you're someone who skipped the first part, you're here now. Now, if you saw my video from yesterday or maybe the day before, I mentioned that I have a half-sister. Well, I actually have two half-sisters, and yes, for those of you who are wondering, they have different fathers from one another, as well as different fathers from me. This story is about the other half-sister, which for now we're going to call her Lana, and I'm going to give you guys some backstory on Lana. She started distancing herself from our mom about 5, maybe 6 years ago. I don't know why. Mom doesn't know why. About 2, maybe 3 years ago, she started expanding that distancing to us siblings, myself included. I have no idea why I'm included on this. I have some guesses, but nothing that's like solidly provable. Now, a little bit before she started to seclude me from her life, I met her new boyfriend. Let's call him Colin. Anyway, you know how women love to bring up vibes and that kind of nonsense? Well, normal people would call that instincts, and my instincts were telling me that Colin was a loser. Now, at the time, I thought it was just because he was a soy boy beta based off of the way that he looked. Now, it could be true, but I now know that there's something more to it than just the way that he looked. About a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks, my sister posted an update on Facebook. It turns out that about a year ago, Colin beat the crap out of her, no pun intended, and strangled her. Thankfully, her son was there, but he was a skinny teenager. All he can do was call 911. Her post was intended to let everyone know what had happened, because now she felt like that she was somewhat safe because Colin had just pled guilty to the charges earlier this month. She included several pictures of the multiple injuries he inflicted on her. It was bad, guys. It was really bad. My brotherly instincts were kicking into overdrive, and I really wanted to, let's just say, do something that would have sent me to prison and Colin to the morgue. Her post also was an opportunity to have a feminist-style bitch fit over her opinion that the legal system is not designed to protect victims of domestic violence. Well, I guess it isn't just her opinion. She is right after all, but she refuses to see why that is. Granted, a lot of that is because she herself is a victim of this horrible crime, but she will never fully comprehend the why, particularly from the perspective of a falsely accused male. The closest she might get to is if her son, my nephew, is falsely accused by some lying evil harlot. Speaking of which, my nephew seeing this happen And calling the police is the sole reason why I do not doubt my sister's claims for a moment. And I kind of hate that about myself. But we all know that there is validity to this, considering how many females are out there who admit to lying about their own family members. Still, I hope my sister gets justice for this heinous crime committed against her. I hope my sister stops picking obvious losers and bastards before the next call-in doesn't stop. I hope my nephew becomes a man instead of a statistic, which I have high hopes that he will become a man. I hope this will eventually lead to my sister pulling her self-inserted stick out of her butt, but only time will tell. Thank you all for listening. We're going to go back to doing shorts and the occasional response to some idiot out there. In the meantime, never forget that if you abuse alcohol, it will abuse you back. And no, I have not dismissed the possibility that he could have just been a drunken dumbass, which would have proven my point. If you abuse alcohol, it will abuse you back.